It began with silence. The kind of silence that hums beneath the earth, heavy, alive, breathing. Deep beneath the hills of southern France, a team of archaeologists lowered themselves into a cavern sealed by time. Dust fell like ancient snow, and every sound they made seemed swallowed by the dark. Their lamps flickered across walls untouched for tens of thousands of years. And then, the light caught something. Figures. Dozens of them. Horses, bison, spirals, hands, painted in red ochre and black charcoal. But there was something different about these images, something unsettling. As the morning sun shifted through a crack in the rock, the colors shimmered. The walls seemed to breathe. Dr. Elise Marin, the team's leader, stepped closer. Her breath clouded in the cold air as she whispered, "They move with the light." The paintings seemed alive, pulsing faintly as the angle of sunlight changed. It wasn't the pigments alone. It was their position, their rhythm, the way they echoed the flicker of dawn and dusk. They named it La Grotte du Souffle Lumière, the cave that breathed light. No one had ever seen anything like it. That night, as their campfire cracked in the valley below, Elise replayed drone footage of the cave. Her assistant, Raphael, studied the flickering shapes on the screen. "Could it be bioluminescence?" he asked. "No," Elise replied, eyes fixed on the dancing shadows. "It's geometry. The light itself completes the art." When the footage was slowed, a strange pattern emerged. The glowing pigments aligned with the path of the rising sun, not just once, but across days. As if the walls were recording time. Cut to the past. Tens of thousands of years ago, before nations, before words, another light flickered in the same cavern. The glow of fire on damp stone. A young hunter named Aru knelt beside an elder woman, her face lined with ash and wisdom. Her name was Saha. She crushed minerals, mixing red earth with water and animal fat. "The sun dies each night," she whispered, "but it is reborn through our hands." Aru watched as she painted a series of arcs, crescents, circles, dots, always in the same order. Above them, a small hole in the roof allowed a thin beam of light to enter the cave at dawn. When it touched the final circle, the clan cheered. They believed the sun had heard their call. To them, this was no art. It was survival, a pact between earth and sky. Back in the present, Elise stood before the same markings, tracing their edges with gloved fingers. Her team had dated the pigment layers using uranium-thorium analysis. The results made no sense. The oldest pigment wasn't from the Magdalenian period. It was older, far older. 29,000 years. That would make these paintings the oldest known human record of astronomical observation. But how could they know the sky so precisely? Raphael, half joking, murmured, "Maybe they were counting moons." Elise looked at him, and for a moment she didn't laugh. Later, as night fell, The team returned to the cave's entrance. Elise switched off her headlamp and looked up. The same stars that Aru once saw now shimmered above her. She wondered if those long-gone artists understood something humanity had forgotten. That time is not just measured, it's felt. Inside the cave, the air grew cold again. The drawings shifted under the faint silver of moonlight, and for the briefest instant, Elise saw it. A pattern of circles that matched the lunar cycle exactly. 29. The same number that appeared in their pigment tests. She whispered into the darkness. They were painting the months. The cave didn't answer, but the wind through its entrance sounded like a breath, ancient, patient, eternal. And as dawn returned, light poured once more into the stone chamber. The figures came alive, glowing softly, as if the spirits of the past were still marking the passing days. The cave had waited, and now it was speaking again. The cave waited. Each dawn, the sun's first breath reached through a narrow slit in the rock, illuminating a single painted spiral. The team recorded every movement, every flicker, and still it made no sense. Dr. Elise Maren stood motionless in front of the wall, her headlamp off. Only the natural light of morning touched the pigments. She whispered softly, "It's not just a painting, it's a conversation." Behind her, Raphael adjusted the tripod and checked the readings. Conversation with who? Elise's voice was calm, distant. With whoever was here before time began. The words echoed through the stone chamber, bouncing off the ancient walls like a memory that refused to fade. Days passed. The scientists mapped the entire cavern, every symbol, every crack, every handprint. But one image refused to be explained. A cluster of dots surrounding a human figure with raised arms. The same image repeated itself deeper in the cave, as if the painter had been counting something, or recording it. Elise noticed that the dots weren't random. They followed a rhythm, 3, then 5, then 8. Fibonacci. A sequence older than civilization, older than reason itself. In her notebook she wrote, "Not chaos, intention, knowledge of recurrence." And yet she could not explain it. Thousands of years earlier, in the same breathless dark, a fire flickered against the stone. The air smelled of smoke and ochre. The elder woman, Saha, watched her apprentice carefully. Aru dipped his hand in the red pigment and pressed it against the wall. Saha nodded. "Every handprint," she said, "is a promise. You touch the world, and it remembers you." Aru hesitated. "But who remembers us, Saha?" She smiled, eyes glinting in the firelight. "The sky does. The stones do. The ones who come after will listen to our whispers." The boy's gaze turned upward, to the thin crack above their heads, where the moonlight filtered through. He counted aloud, 1, 2, 3, as the light shifted. Each mark, each breath became a measure of the night. That was how the cycle began. In the present, Elise dreamt of that same voice. For nights she barely slept. She could hear whispers in the cave's recordings, faint, rhythmic sounds that pulsed between seconds of silence. At first, she dismissed them as static interference, until one evening, Raphael enhanced the audio. The frequencies matched the pattern of the painted dots. Heartbeat, he suggested? No, rhythm of something else, something repeating. She compared the intervals to lunar phases. They matched, almost perfectly. It was as if the cave itself had been designed to speak in cycles, to echo the turning of the heavens. Meanwhile, the flashbacks grew stronger. In the ancient world, Aru and Saha led the clan to the mouth of the cave, where the valley opened like a sleeping beast. They marked the horizon with stones, counting the days until the sun rose through the same gap again. When it did, they danced. They painted. They called it the return of the light. Saha raised her hands, chanting words that carried no meaning in language, only in feeling. Gratitude, fear, and awe. The others joined, stamping their feet against the earth, their shadows flickering like spirits on the walls. Aru watched the pattern of sunlight crawling toward the paintings. It touched the same spiral every time. He realized then what Saha meant. They weren't just marking the sun. They were recording eternity. Back in the lab tent, Elise stared at the printed pigment results again. The ochre contained traces of lunar dust, microscopic particles of meteorite, crushed and mixed with animal fat. How would they even know, she murmured. How could they have found that? Raphael looked up from his notes. Maybe they didn't find it. Maybe it found them. Outside, the wind whistled through the valley. The same wind that once carried chants, fire smoke, and the smell of wet earth. Elise closed her eyes and listened. The sound was soft, almost like breathing. And in that breath, for the briefest instant, she felt a presence, the weight of something vast and patient, something that had watched humanity crawl, paint, and dream for millennia. The cave was not just an artifact. It was a voice, ancient, still speaking, still teaching. The next morning, when the sun returned, Elise followed its beam deeper into the darkness. It struck a hidden wall they hadn't seen before. And there, beneath a crust of calcite and dust, was a new figure, faint but unmistakable. A human form, arms raised, surrounded by crescents. At its base, a single line of dots spiraled outward, like a calendar drawn in stone. Elise whispered, almost afraid to break the silence. They were measuring the moon. And in the shadows behind her, the echo seemed to answer. A breath, a heartbeat, a whisper from the ancestors. The cave no longer felt silent. Every drop of water that fell from the ceiling echoed like a drum. Every gust of wind that slipped through the cracks hummed like a breath. Elise Moren stood motionless in the dark, staring at the newly uncovered wall. Her lamp's beam trembled across the faint outlines of ancient symbols, arcs, dots, crescents, and one central spiral that seemed to pulse with light when her shadow moved. For a moment, she turned off the lamp entirely. The glow of dawn filtered through the opening above, falling across the spiral center. It was then that she realized the paintings weren't still. They were alive, designed to change with light, to move as the day did. The wall was singing. 3 weeks later, the team gathered the data. Using digital mapping and light simulation, Raphael recreated the cave's interior in 3D. He aligned the sun's position during different seasons, and slowly a pattern emerged. The paintings aligned not just with the sun, but with the moon and stars. Each dot, each curve pointed to a celestial event, an eclipse, a solstice, a lunar standstill. Elise watched in awe as the program connected the symbols like constellations. "This is not art," she whispered. "It's astronomy." Cut to the past. Firelight licked the walls. Smoke coiled toward the ceiling. Aru stood before Saha and the elders. The people of his clan had gathered in silence. In his hand he held a stone covered in markings, a small circle surrounded by radiating lines. He placed it on the ground beside the fire. "The stones sing," he said. "Each has a sound when struck. Together they make the voice of the sky." The elders watched as he arranged the stones in a pattern, one for each phase of the moon. When he tapped them gently with a bone stick, a series of tones filled the cave, deep, rhythmic, almost melodic. Saha closed her eyes. "Do you hear it?" she whispered. "That is the heartbeat of time." The clan listened, entranced. It was not music as we know it, but a language made of echo and vibration. A ritual to bind the tribe to the rhythm of the heavens. In the present, Elisa's team noticed something strange. When they clapped or spoke in certain areas, the echoes bounced differently, as if the cave had been shaped to resonate at specific frequencies. "Resonant acoustics," Raphael said, amazed. "They tuned the cave like an instrument." Elise nodded slowly. "The song of the stones," she murmured, recalling her dreams. Sound, light, rhythm, all woven together into one vast expression of understanding. The ancestors hadn't merely decorated their world, they had built a way to hear it. That night, Elise stayed behind. She switched off the artificial lights and sat in the dark. Her heartbeat slowed, and the stillness enveloped her. Then she began to hum, a single note, low and steady. To her astonishment, the cave responded. The sound returned, amplified and softened, blending with her voice until she could no longer tell where she ended and the echo began. In that moment, she felt it, the connection across millennia. Somewhere, Aru might have done the same.
a boy beneath the stars, humming to the stones so the sky would listen. The following morning, Elise shared her discovery with the team. They recorded sound waves bouncing through the cavern and plotted the resonances. When they converted the data into visual form, the waveforms resembled the same spiral painted on the walls. Raphael stared at the image. "The pattern repeats every 29 beats," he said. 29, Elise repeated softly. "The lunar month." The room fell silent. Could it be that those early humans not only mapped the heavens, but also heard them? That they transformed astronomy into sound, turning time itself into music? Back in the ancient firelight, Aru continued the ritual. He struck the stones again, faster this time, matching the rhythm of his breath. Around him, the clan chanted in a circle. The sound filled the chamber, vibrating through bone and earth. Saha's eyes glistened. "Do you feel it, Aru?" she asked. He nodded. "It moves through me." She smiled. "Then you understand. The song will outlive us. The stones will remember." He pressed his palm against the wall, leaving a red imprint beside the spiral. That handprint, his, would remain for 30,000 years. In the modern world, Elise pressed her gloved hand to the same mark. The warmth of her skin passed through the thin layer of fabric, and she whispered, "We hear you." Outside, thunder rolled across the valley. The storm was coming, both in the present and in the past. The earth trembled. The recordings wavered, and somewhere deep within the rock, the hum grew louder. The song of the stones was awakening.
It began with a storm. The valley trembled as rain hammered the mountains, and the sky roared like something alive. Water cascaded down the slopes, flooding the narrow entrance to La Grotte du Souffle Lumière. The team had to seal their equipment, their voices drowned beneath the thunder. Inside, Elise Marraine sat alone, her back pressed to the ancient wall. Her headlamp flickered as she watched the spirals glisten under rivulets of water. The cave seemed to be weeping, or remembering. The instruments buzzed with interference. No signal, no light, only the whisper of the storm outside and the low hum of dripping stone. The world had gone still, and yet the air felt heavy, vibrating with something she couldn't name. She whispered into the dark, "Why does it feel like the world has stopped breathing?" Thousands of years earlier, the same storm had come. Only then it had no name, only fear. Aru stood at the cave's entrance, watching the sky split open with light. The clan huddled inside, clutching their children, their tools, their charms. The rain did not stop for days. The sun vanished. The moon never rose. "The sky," one of the elders cried, "has stopped moving." Animals fled the valley. The rivers overflowed. The stars, the sacred points they used to count time, disappeared behind a ceiling of endless clouds. Without the movement of the heavens, the tribe could not track the seasons. They could not hunt or plant or pray.
The world had lost its rhythm. Saha sat near the fire, her frail hands tracing patterns in the dirt. Aru knelt beside her. "What do we do, Mother of Shadows?" he asked. She looked at him with eyes that glowed like fading embers. "When the sky falls silent," she whispered, "we must remind it to move." In the present, Elise stared at her laptop screen. Every light sensor in the cave had gone flat, as if the sunlight itself had been erased. Days passed. The storm refused to end. Raphael tried to keep morale high, joking about nature's revenge. But Elise felt the same unease that once haunted those first skywatchers. She wrote in her field journal, "The sun and moon no longer reach the walls. The alignment has broken. The cave feels empty." But that night, something changed. As the storm raged outside, a deep tremor rippled through the ground. The team's seismograph flared red. Rocks cracked in the tunnel. And when the lights went out completely, the cave came alive. Faint glimmers of light emerged from the walls. Phosphorescent traces of pigment glowing under the electrical charge of the storm. Elise gasped. "The paintings," she whispered, "they're responding." The shapes pulsed like a heartbeat, slow, then faster, as if the cave were echoing the thunder outside. Raphael raised his voice above the wind. "It's not just pigment, it's a reaction. The minerals are piezoelectric." Elise didn't move. She felt something older, something that science couldn't measure. The cave wasn't reacting. It was remembering. In the ancient past, Aru returned to the sacred wall. He carried a torch of resin and bone and painted anew upon the fading symbols. His hands shook as he pressed the ochre into stone. "We must bring back the light," he said to the clan. "The spirits are asleep. We must wake them." He began to trace the same spirals, the same hands over and over, but faster this time, desperate, his breath coming in gasps. Each mark a prayer, each dot a plea. When he finished, he fell to his knees, exhausted. The fire burned low. The world was still dark. Saha placed her hand on his shoulder. "The sky will move again," she said softly, "but not because we ask, because we remember." She looked at the wall, now glowing faintly with the reflected firelight. "It is not the sun that moves," she whispered. "It is us." Back in the modern storm, Elise pressed her palm against the same spot. The light beneath her hand flickered, and for a brief instant she saw it, a shape forming behind the centuries of pigment, a figure raising its arms toward the heavens, surrounded by radiating lines. Lightning flashed through the cave's mouth, illuminating the figure, and for one impossible moment, the image moved. The arms lifted, the lines expanded, as if the painting itself breathed. Raphael shouted her name, pulling her back from the wall. "Elise, the entrance is flooding!" But she barely heard him. She was staring at the glowing spiral, whispering through trembling lips. They painted motion to keep the world from standing still. When the storm finally passed, the valley was transformed. The river had carved new paths. The trees lay broken. And yet, in the silence that followed, The light returned, hesitant, fragile, like a new dawn. Inside the cave, the spirals caught the sunlight again, and for the first time in days, Elise smiled. The sky was moving once more. She closed her eyes and could almost hear them. The chants of a ruse clan, the rhythm of painted hands, the song that once held the cosmos together. The cave had survived storms, floods, and millennia of silence, because what it held was not a story of death, but of continuation. The same rhythm, the same song, unbroken.
The storm had passed, but in its silence the world felt changed. The air in the valley carried the scent of ash and wet stone. The trees dripped like tears, and mist clung to the mountainsides. Elise Morin walked slowly toward the cave, boots sinking into the mud, her mind still echoing with the storm's memory. She had seen the paintings move, not metaphorically. They had breathed, pulsed, shimmered. The idea haunted her. Science could explain the minerals, the charges, the chemistry, but not the feeling that the cave was alive. Inside, the air was cold and metallic. The lamps cast trembling halos on the walls. Raphael and the others were cataloging fragments of broken rock from the cave floor. "Elise," Raphael called, "we found something." He held up a flat, circular stone, carved with deep notches along its rim. The center bore faint traces of soot and heat discoloration. Elise frowned. "A hearthstone?" "Not exactly," he said, turning it slowly under the light. "The markings, they're deliberate, evenly spaced. It's like a dial," she finished for him, "like a clock." They exchanged a long silence. Two scientists standing in the ruins of time itself, holding something that should not exist. That night, Elise examined the stone under magnification. The soot residue suggested repeated exposure to controlled flame. Around the edges, the notches formed a precise pattern, 30 marks in total. 30 days. A lunar cycle. Her pulse quickened. "It's a calendar," she murmured, "but not to count days, to measure shadows." She imagined it, a small fire in the center, the stone's edge catching the play of light and darkness as the flame flickered, each notch representing the journey of the moon, from birth to death and back again. The first human timekeeper. The first clock. Long before Elise's discovery, that same fire had burned. Aru crouched beside it, the smoke curling through the narrow shaft of the cave. His face was streaked with soot, his hands raw from grinding pigments. He stared at the circle of stone before him, its grooves blackened from endless flame. The storm had taken many from the clan. The river swallowed their shelters, and the animals had vanished from the valley. Only the fire remained, burning low, eternal. Saha sat across from him, her voice soft and tired. "The sky moves again," she said, "but slower. The spirits are watching.
Aru nodded, his eyes fixed on the dance of the flame. "I can see them in the shadows," he whispered. "The days, the moons, they follow the fire." He marked another notch in the stone's edge with a flint blade. Each cut a measure of light and loss. Each spark a reminder that time could be counted, not just seen, but kept. In the present, Elise demonstrated the discovery to her team. She lit a small fire in the replica they'd made of the stone disk. The flickering light threw shadows across the notches. Raphael whispered, "They were timing the moon." Elise shook her head slowly. "Not timing it, talking to it." The fire danced, and for a brief instant the shadows appeared to move like hands across a clock, marking invisible hours in a world that had never known them. Elise felt a chill crawl down her spine. It wasn't just technology, it was theology. The people of this cave had invented the rhythm of existence. They had captured time. Back in the past, Aru sat alone before his fire, now small and fading. The others slept. He could feel the weight of years pressing down, and yet the flame still spoke to him, a voice older than words. He whispered to it, "When you die, so will I, but your shadow will keep moving." He leaned forward and pressed his hand into the soot, leaving a dark print beside the firestone. That print, blackened and fragile, would be buried in sediment, unseen for millennia, until another hand, thousands of years later, would touch it again. In the present, Elise reached the same layer in the excavation trench. Her gloves brushed away the dirt, revealing the faint outline of a human hand, smaller than hers, burned into the stone by ancient fire. Her breath caught. She placed her palm over it, aligning her fingers with his. For a heartbeat, the cave felt warm. The air shimmered with reflected light, as though the fire still burned somewhere in the deep. Raphael stood beside her in silence. "Elise," he whispered, "that's impossible." She smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "So was time once." The next morning, they tested the alignment of the stone with the cave's natural light. As the sun's rays crept through the fissure, the final notch on the disk glowed, perfectly synchronized with the rising sun. It marked not just the end of a cycle, but the beginning of another. The ancestors had built their own eternity, a circle of fire and shadow, of endings and rebirths. And in that realization, Elise understood something profound. The people of the cave hadn't been trying to measure time. They had been trying to belong to it. As dusk fell, the team extinguished their lamps. The cave returned to darkness, but in the stillness, the memory of flame lingered. Shadows moved softly across the walls, as though the fire had never truly died. And outside, the moon rose, ancient, unbroken, watching the same earth it had watched since Aru first lifted his torch to the sky. The fire still measures its shadows, and time still remembered their light.
Night fell upon the valley like a slow exhale. The air was cool, crystalline, filled with the scent of damp moss and burnt pine. Elise Maren stood at the cave's entrance, the moonlight bathing the stone in a silver sheen. Behind her, the team had fallen silent. The generators were off, the cameras unplugged. Only the cave breathed. She had felt it before, that pulse, that almost imperceptible rhythm beneath the ground. But tonight it was stronger. It was as if the mountain itself was waiting for something. She lifted her lamp and stepped inside. The walls shimmered faintly with mineral light. The drawings, the mammoths, the spirals, the hands, seemed more vivid than ever, as if the storm had polished their souls. Elise paused before the central panel. The constellations painted there, dots and lines etched with ochre and crushed bone, told a story older than language. A story that had survived in silence. She whispered into the darkness, "You wanted the sky to listen to you." And for a heartbeat, it almost seemed to answer. Long before Elise's footsteps echoed in that place, another pair of eyes had looked up to the same stars. Aru sat atop the ridge, the fire behind him flickering like a wounded sun. The world was cold, quieter now. Winter had come to the valley. Beside him, Saha pointed upward, her finger tracing invisible paths between the stars. "They are the ancestors," she said softly. "They walk the night so we can find our way." Aru's eyes narrowed. He had been marking the days, the moons, the shadows, but now something in him shifted. Perhaps time was not only measured by fire, but also by light that never burned out. He gathered soot and pigment, mixing them with melted fat. Then, one by one, he painted the stars upon the cave ceiling. Each dot a memory, each line a promise. The birth of a constellation. In the present, Elise stood in that same chamber, her flashlight dancing over the ancient star map. She could trace Orion, Pleiades, the curve of Taurus, but their arrangement wasn't exact. There were extra stars, misplaced, as though the sky itself had been different then. Her mind raced. "Raphael," she called, "look at this." He approached, eyes widening. "These don't match the modern night sky." "Exactly," she said. "They match the sky from 32,000 years ago." The cave wasn't just an observatory. It was a memory. Elise projected a simulation on her tablet, the prehistoric night sky reconstructed in motion. She compared it to the wall paintings. The match was perfect, but something else caught her attention. In the far corner of the ceiling, hidden behind a stalactite, there was a cluster of small, nearly invisible dots, too faint to be stars. Raphael shone his light. "They're connected," he said, "like a path." Elise stepped closer, her breath trembling. Not a path, a journey. In the past, Aru and Saha stood at the cave's heart, surrounded by their clan.
The firelight made the ceiling dance with gold. The painted stars glowed faintly under the smoke. Aru lifted a burning torch and raised it toward the painted heavens. He spoke words that had no language yet. Rhythm, sound, breath, a song of light. "The stars will remember us," Saha murmured, "even when the ground forgets." And the clan sang, voices blending with the crackle of fire and the whispers of wind outside. The cave walls pulsed with their rhythm, their echoes painting themselves into eternity. That night became legend. The night the people sang to the stars and believed the stars sang back. Thousands of years later, Elise stood beneath those same stars. She turned off her lamp. Darkness enveloped her, absolute and infinite. Then, slowly, her eyes adjusted. The pigments, the ancient minerals, began to shimmer faintly in the moonlight filtering through a crack in the stone. One by one, the stars came alive. The same constellations Aru had painted, glowing softly, as if lit from within. Elise's heart pounded. She whispered, "They painted with light." The ancients had discovered that certain minerals stored luminescence, a primitive phosphorescence activated by the fire's heat. The stars literally shone after dark. It was not only a story. It was science, faith, and art bound together with wonder. She felt tears in her eyes. For all our satellites and telescopes, she thought, we had never come closer to the soul of time than they had. Those people who sang beneath stone skies. She looked around, realizing something else. Each star cluster aligned with the same places the notches on the time stone had once marked. The ancients had built a full calendar, not in wood or bone, but in light itself. A cosmic rhythm encoded on stone. The fire had measured shadows. Now the stars measured eternity. Outside, the wind rose gently, carrying the scent of ancient smoke. Elise stepped out of the cave and looked up. The night sky was clear, magnificent. The same constellations, the same cold fire. She imagined Aru standing where she stood now, looking up, wondering if someone, someday, would see what he saw. She smiled softly. "I see you," she whispered to the stars. The wind shifted, and for an instant she thought she heard it. A faint hum, like a song carried across 30,000 years. Aru's voice, Saha's breath, the rhythm of flame and shadow, all blending into one infinite note that connected the living and the lost. And somewhere deep in the cave, the painted stars still glowed, their faint light breathing across stone, their song still echoing in the dust. The ancestors had not vanished. They had simply become light.
The cave exhaled. Elise Moran felt it the moment she stepped inside. Not a literal breath, of course, yet the walls seemed alive, pulsing faintly with memory. The air smelled of stone, minerals, and something older, something human and impossible to define. She walked slowly, fingertips brushing the ochre spirals. Each line, each dot carried the weight of a story that had begun long before her. The same story Aru had once touched with his hands, and Saha had whispered into the fire-lit shadows. Time here was not linear. It bent, folded over itself, like the spirals painted on the walls. Past and present overlapped, coexisting in a fragile rhythm that no modern device could fully measure. In the past, Aru sat alone on a ledge near the cave's heart. The night sky stretched above him, vast, black, and dotted with the same stars he had painted so long ago. He traced their positions with his finger in the dust, murmuring the song of their movements. "Stone and sky breathe together," he whispered. Saha approached quietly. Her eyes glimmered in the torchlight. "You feel it," she said softly. "Even the stones remember the stars. They remember everything." Aru nodded. "If we lose this memory, the sky will move, but we will not understand it." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we must become memory ourselves. Every mark, every song, every breath, it will be enough." The wind stirred outside the cave entrance, carrying the scent of frost and wet earth. In that moment, Aru realized the magnitude of what they had created. They had not only recorded time, they had made themselves part of it. In the present, Elise examined the cave ceiling. The painted stars were still faintly luminescent, glowing like embers from a fire long dead. Using ultraviolet and spectral imaging, her team traced patterns that aligned perfectly with ancient solstices and equinoxes. "This," Raphael whispered, "is a complete astronomical record. Months, years, eclipses, even comets." Elise nodded slowly, feeling the weight of centuries pressing against her chest. "And yet," she murmured, "it's more than that. It's a philosophy. They didn't just watch the sky, they breathed with it." She realized then that the firestones, the handprints, the painted constellations, all were part of a single continuum, a way to connect human consciousness with the cosmos, to anchor mortality against eternity. Flashback to Aru's time. The clan had gathered one final night under the full moon. Each member carried a torch, their light casting dancing shadows on the walls. Aru traced the spirals one last time, connecting each dot with a line of firelight, ensuring that the movements of the sun, moon, and stars were preserved in a ritual as much as in pigment. Saha sang softly, her voice blending with the crackle of flames. The clan repeated her melody, their chant vibrating the cave, weaving memory into stone and echo into air. Aru's gaze turned to the horizon. He understood something profound. The cave was not merely a vessel of knowledge. It was a bridge between generations, between life and death, between earth and sky. The paintings were more than images.
They were a breath, eternal, patient, unbroken. In the modern era, Elise followed the path of Aru's handprints, her own hand aligned with his on the ancient wall. A subtle warmth seemed to radiate through the stone, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. She whispered into the darkness, "I understand you. I see the rhythm. I feel the breath." Outside, the wind carried a faint sound, like the echo of 1,000 whispers across the mountains. It could have been the storm returning, or it could have been the ancestors still singing through stone, fire, and light. Raphael adjusted the sensors, but the data revealed nothing measurable. Elise shook her head, smiling faintly. Not everything that matters can be measured. The cave was a living archive. It held the pulse of the cosmos, the memory of human wonder, and the rhythm of lives long past. That night, Elise and her team lit a small fire in the cave, just as Aru once had. The flames flickered against the walls, animating the ancient figures. Shadows danced across the spirals and constellations, revealing alignments invisible in the daylight. For the first time, they saw it, the full circle. The firestones, the painted stars, the lunar notches, the handprints, all elements of the same cosmic choreography. It was a song of stone and sky, a rhythm written in pigment, carved in shadows, sung in firelight. Elise exhaled, feeling the centuries settle around her. She had touched something eternal, something beyond science and beyond time. And as she looked up at the faintly glowing stars overhead, she knew the cave's breath would never end. It would continue to pulse with life, with memory, with wonder, as long as someone, somewhere, still remembered how to listen.
The cave was silent. Not truly silent, but still, as if holding its final breath. Elise Morin stood at the center of the chamber, the glow of the ancient pigments faint against the cold stone. After months of study, of storms and discoveries, of tracing Aru's handprints and the firestone markings, she finally understood. Time itself had been breathing here for tens of thousands of years. In the distant past, Aru had pressed his palm against the wall one final time. The fire had burned low. The painted stars above glimmered faintly in the torchlight. Around him, the clan was still, watching the night sky, listening to the song of shadows and fire. He whispered to Saha, "We are small. The world is vast. Yet what we leave here, it will live." Saha nodded, eyes reflecting firelight and starlight in equal measure. Our memory becomes the stone, our breath becomes the sky, and the sky will remember us. Aru exhaled slowly. The moonlight filtered through the cave entrance, illuminating the painted spirals. For the first time, the ancients felt that their work, their art, their science, their ritual had touched eternity. In the present, Elise closed her eyes and listened. The hum of the cave, soft, subtle, almost imperceptible, echoed in her chest. The firestone replicas, the lunar notches, the painted constellations, the handprints, all of it formed a single rhythm. The cave was not a record of the past. It was a bridge across time. Every mark, every shadow, every flicker of light carried the breath of those who had come before. She touched a spiral and whispered, "I hear you. I see you. I feel you." And for a moment she could almost hear the voice of Aru, Saha, and the countless others, a whisper that traveled across millennia, saying, "We remember. We continue. Time moves because we breathe." Outside, the valley was quiet. The storm had passed completely. Moonlight spilled across the rocks, illuminating the same landscape Aru had known, unchanged yet transformed by memory. Elise thought about the fire that measured shadows, the stars painted on stone, the handprints marking the rhythm of the sky. She understood now that human curiosity, wonder, and reverence for the universe were as old as time itself. The cave had survived because it was alive in purpose. The people who had painted, carved, and traced cycles into its walls had done more than record the seasons. They had inscribed their presence into eternity. A final glance at the wall revealed the patterns in full. Spirals intertwined with constellations, crescents marking the lunar phases, and handprints frozen in time. All connected, forming a complex rhythm of fire, stone, shadow, and sky. Elise exhaled. She felt a shiver run through her. The cave's message was clear. Time was not only counted in years or months, but in breath, in firelight, in human wonder. And in that understanding, she felt the weight and beauty of human continuity, that even in silence, in darkness, in isolation, life leaves echoes. The cave had waited. The cave had spoken. And now Elise knew she would carry that voice forward. As dawn approached, sunlight touched the spirals and constellations once more. The pigments shimmered faintly. The firestone would no longer burn. The clan was gone, yet their presence remained, woven into the very rhythm of the cave. Elise stepped outside, letting the fresh morning air fill her lungs. She looked up at the sky, stars fading, sun rising, and smiled. The breath of time continued, and humanity, small and fleeting as it was, had finally learned to listen. The end.